Hey, what's up, everybody? We are back again, and today I want to discuss a topic that I've been thinking about a lot over the past couple weeks. Every time I cover an artist on this channel, one of the first things that I look into is who influenced them, and over time, I've started to see the same people pop up time and time again. People like Future, Gucci Mane, Chief Keef, Lil B.
First off, how you gonna be called Little B when the B is capitalized?
You can be a bee. You'll live like a bee.
For the hook, I was just like thinking like
And that's really made me think, who actually is the most influential artist when it comes to the SoundCloud wave? If you were to look at the modern underground scene of rappers and look at who they were influenced by, and then trace back who that person was influenced by, and so on, where would you eventually end up? Well, that's what I want to figure out today. But before we get started, I do want to set down a couple ground rules. First of all, to be part of the SoundCloud wave, you don't actually have to have posted music on SoundCloud. As confusing as that may sound, a lot of people that we heavily associate with that wave of music didn't actually get their start by posting music on SoundCloud, instead putting it on other websites like SoundClick, Bandcamp, and even YouTube. I mean, there was a whole controversy about that back in 2018 with rappers like 6ix9ine and Juice WRLD, where people said they weren't real SoundCloud rappers because they mostly dropped music on YouTube and not on the app. At this point, it's really a name used to cover a certain type of music, a certain sound, a certain look, and I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. The face tattoos, the colorful hair, the more drugged out sound that really popped off at the time, as well as the aggressive sound that was also very popular, people pulling up at warehouses and doing crazy shows with a bunch of underground fans, and most importantly, using the internet to build your career. Now, it's very important to make the distinction right here between somebody like Tyler the Creator and Blade. You see artists like Odd Future, ASAP Mob, and Mac Miller really popped off in the blog era, where basically they did use the internet to help build their career, but they also had a lot of in real life motion, whereas people like Young Lean and Blade basically built their entire presence online. A better example would be somebody like Joey, who never would have been able to build a musical career in his hometown of Rhode Island because nobody was really fucking with that type of music, so instead he took to the internet, created his own style, and eventually became popular on there. And because artists like this have so much freedom online to make the music that they want, they end up creating some very strange sounds that people hadn't heard before, because oftentimes when you listen to rap, you associate different cities with different sounds. Like, for example, Chicago has drill, New York has boom bap, LA has, well, basically anything, and Florida, well, we'll get to Florida, but right now let's start looking at the possible candidates that could be the most influential artists to ever touch the SoundCloud wave. And of course, whoever the father of SoundCloud rap is must have a lot of aura, but you know who has even more aura than even the father of SoundCloud rap himself? Well, today's sponsor, Aura. Are you tired of scam emails and spam calls that do nothing but waste your limited time that you have on this planet? Well, luckily, today's sponsor can help you with that. Have you ever wondered how these people even get your phone number in the first place? Well, it turns out that there's people called data brokers whose sole job is finding your personal information online and selling it to these annoying spam callers. And even worse than that, they make billions while doing it. And they do all of this without your knowledge or consent. However, there is a way to fight back by simply asking them to stop. However, just like most things in life, it's easier said than done, and the process is made purposely difficult in attempts to prevent people from trying. And that's where today's sponsor comes in, Aura. They take care of the hard part by automatically removing all of your personal information off of these sites, and not only that, but they keep it off, which not only protects you from further scam calls, but can actually protect your identity online from hackers and cyber stalkers. I've actually been using Aura for a couple weeks, and it's really helped me out to clear out all the annoying spam that I have in my inbox, meaning I don't have to spend countless hours going through and deleting every single one of them, which gives me more time to do what I love. But that's not all, because Aura does so much more, including giving you alerts if your personal information is found on the dark web, real-time fraud alert for credit cards and banking, 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure, a secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and even more. And on top of that, they have a US-based support available around the clock if something does go wrong, with over $5 million of fraud protection. So sign up today by using my code aura.com/twistedworld to get a 14-day free trial and start taking your online security Cardi seriously today. Thank you to Aura for sponsoring the video, and without further ado, on to the main topic. And I think the best place to start is definitely Playboy Cardi. Now I know I've been talking about him a lot recently, so I'm not going to get too into detail, but when you listen to a lot of the modern day underground artists that are popular right now, they definitely all sound like they're influenced by either Cardi or Uzi. Now we'll get to Uzi a little bit later on, but when it comes to Cardi, it's hard to not give him props for pioneering a type of music that is now almost too popular in the underground scene. I mean, everybody from Summers to Yeet to Two Hollis to Netspend to, of course, all the artists in the Opium label all kind of have a similar style to him. And before you guys get upset and say that Netspend doesn't make that type of music, I'm not saying that it sounds exactly the same, but it's definitely inspired off of that style. And that's the thing about influence. You create a style and then people can take it in their own direction. I really don't understand why in the modern underground people get so defensive over these types of comparisons. I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking a little bit of influence from somebody else as long as you're not biting them one to one. I mean, damn, when Lil Pump was blowing up back in 2016, there was people biting his style left and right, and nobody really seemed to give a shit. We all just kind of considered it as part of the same wave, and with people coming from the same places, it makes sense that the music sounds kind of similar. But that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Right now, we got to get back to Cardi, and I would say that most modern underground fans really want to give him the title of creating that whole psychedelic sounding type of music. You know exactly what I'm talking about, where you mix the vocals in with the beat, so it's kind of hard to tell what's what, and you're not really dropping full-on bars, more so just hyping up different parts of the song. I'm sorry if I'm explaining this shittily, I'm not Anthony Fantano, and it's very hard to describe what a song sounds like, but the most important thing about this type of music is that it's more of a vibe and you feel it more than you actually listen to it, which is almost the exact opposite of what hip-hop was, because back in the day you would listen to the music to really hear the bars that the rapper was spitting, listening to it over and over again to try to understand absolutely everything that he was putting into the wordplay. But with Cardi, there's no wordplay because there's barely any words, but despite that, this would spawn off two different genres of music over time, with hyperpop becoming very popular in the early 2020s, as well as rage really popping off around the time, although at this point it has kind of burnt out. But if we're going to talk about rage music, I really feel like we got to talk about Trippie Redd, right? A lot of people say that he's the one who created that genre in the first place. However, in my opinion, I really only think that he's the one who named it. You could also say that Whole Lotta Red was the first ever rage project, or you could go even farther back and say that So Fago really started this all the way back in 2019. People will argue that it was Ken Carson or OG Mako, but either way, it all comes from the same place, and that all leads back to Cardi. Although it's not fair to say that he was the sole artist running with the sound at the time, because during the year of 2017 when he was really blowing up, he also had Made in Tokyo, as well as the other two members of Splur Gang like Thousand Band Fani, Uno the Activist, as well as other friends of Cardi like Lucky and D Savage. Now fair enough, you could probably say that Cardi showed both Thousand Band Fani and Lucky this style of music and then they ran off with it, but when it comes to Uno, he might have actually been making that sound before Cardi, so is he really the father of all of this? Well, that's definitely a possibility, but right now we're not trying to find the father of rage, we're trying to find the father of SoundCloud, so let's look at some other candidates and see if maybe they fit the bill. And I can't think of a better place to look than with the very same XSL freshman list that came out in 2017, with another one of the freshmen being XSXion. Now this guy is definitely one of the most popular artists to ever come out of the SoundCloud wave. In fact, most people even say that the entire wave died when he did. And while I don't necessarily agree with that argument, the energy that he carried along with him definitely was felt by everybody, and when he did finally pass away, it unfortunately did feel like things were very different. However, when it comes to influence, I would say that he's not as influential as people give him credit for. First of all, people try to say that he created the whole rage style of music, which of course he didn't. He only made trap metal, which is completely different. And if you want to try to claim that he created that genre, that's also not true. There was many who were doing it way before him, and he even admitted that he was influenced by different people at the time. You might be able to give him props for creating the whole distorted screaming style, because back in the day he had a really shitty Blue Snowball mic that would constantly peak when he was yelling into it, and because of that it ended up creating its own style. Now personally, this is the type of music that I absolutely can't stand, but despite that, X might be the one who pioneered it in the first place, so we gotta give him props for that. And another misconception that I always hear about him is that he's actually the one who created the whole vamp wave, which we already know isn't true at this point. Little Tracy was doing it way before, as well as Space Ghost Perp, Jim Jones. The guy simply wore dark clothes. I mean, goth people have been doing that for years and years and probably even centuries. series, so I don't think he really has a claim to that. But don't take this as me trying to take away all of the influence that X put on the modern underground scene, because I definitely think that he was influential in one big way, and that's underground shows. As we already know, all the way back in 2015, X was running with an underground collective known as Members Only, who would put on shows all over Florida, and the energy at these shows were never seen before. He would do things like create mosh pits in these very small warehouses, as well as creating several songs that had very simplistic lyrics, meaning that even if people didn't know the words to his song, they could at least scream something back at him, which really created this type of energy that people had never seen before. I know it's kind of corny to talk about energy when you're referring to X, but he really did create some energy when it came to this. Alright, I'll stop saying the word now. And while I know there's probably hundreds of artists who are going to try to claim that they were doing this before X, as well as him mostly taking a lot of these techniques from rock shows at the time and in the early 90s, he's still the one who popularized it, and in some cases, being the one who makes it popular is more important than being the one who actually created the trend. I mean, I'm sure the first ever SoundCloud rapper is somebody that we've never even heard of before. They probably discovered the app back in like 2008, dropped one rap song on there, and then completely disappeared, and nobody knows his name. He's the first to do it, but if you never get popular for it, you kind of get lost to history. Okay, so now that we've covered two of the biggest players from 2017, let's go back to 2016, where the wave really started to catch popularity, and see if we can find somebody who's more influential than these two. And I think the best place to look would be the 2016 XSL freshman list, with artists like Lil Yachty and Lil Uzi Vert, who really kicked the door open for the mainstream to pay attention to the SoundCloud wave. And don't get me wrong, there definitely were a lot of artists doing it before them, but they're the first two to really get on mainstream platforms, although at first it was really only to be seen as jokes. That's right, back in 2015 and 2016, people were really looking at Yachty and Uzi as the death of hip hop. They didn't have any talent, they were making very simplistic music, and they were really only getting popular off of the way that they looked. Those red dreads that Yachty had really spiked a lot of old heads' blood pressure, and honestly, I'm not really sure why. He wasn't doing anything all that different than other rappers in the underground scene, but I guess he was the one who got noticed first, so he caused the most outrage. However, besides his style, I wouldn't really say that the type of music that he was making at the time is all that influential. It was basically a very generic Atlanta flow, similar to what the Migos were doing, and while that definitely worked for him, you really can't sit here and tell me that he pioneered any specific sound of music, at least this early on. Later on in his career, he did get more experimental, but when he first came through the gate, it was very generic, and well, that's okay because everybody was doing that flow at the time. However, Uzi was experimental and interesting right out of the gate, with him coming out with this rapid flow that nobody had really heard before. However, when talking about Uzi, you gotta kind of put him in the same box as Cardi, where he was very influential, but there was also a lot of other people doing the same style around the same time, so you can't really say that he created that sound. And in fact, I would say that he took a lot of his style from another popular artist at the time, going by the name of Famous Dex. Now, I know people look down on Famous Dex heavily nowadays, because after all, he ended up getting on hard drugs and basically destroyed his entire career, leading people to say that he was never even good in the first place. But I really don't think that's fair to say. Famous Dex definitely had bangers between the years of 2014 and 2019. He really only started to burn out once the pandemic took place, and he's actually a lot more influential than people ever want to give him credit for. He was really one of the first SoundCloud rappers to gain popularity, even before Yachty and Uzi. He had the face tattoos, he had the colorful hair, he was dropping non-stop music videos with a pretty simplistic flow that people hadn't really heard before. He came out of the hoods of Chicago with a very unique style that nobody had ever really heard before, not to mention he was very instrumental in making Lyrical Lemonade into what it is today. However, if you're going to talk about artists that helped Lyrical Lemonade early on, you also got to talk about Warhol SS, because he was the first artist on there to really get a pop-in video, although the sound that he was making is very similar to Dex, so you can kind of put them in the same box. But surprisingly, some people actually put Dex in the box of being the first ever SoundCloud rapper. I've actually seen a couple YouTube videos where people make that claim, although I'm sorry to tell you that's definitely not true. He really started to pop off around 2014 to 2015, which is pretty early when it comes to the overall wave, but there are definitely artists that go way farther back than him, so let's talk about them now. I mean, what about Stitches, guys? He really started to pop off in mid-2015 with the crazy face tattoos, the screaming music. He definitely seems like a prototype for a lot of these trap metal artists, but no, for real, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Stitches really had all that much influence sound-wise on the modern underground scene. I mean, as much as I want to call him the first trap metal artist, because honestly I find that funny, the style of screaming that he was doing at the time was more similar to crunk, which had already become popular with artists like Waka Flocka and Little John. Or you could go even farther back with people like DMX, and I wouldn't include any of those artists in the SoundCloud wave, so really the the only thing that Stitches pioneered was being a goofball who chased clout online and having crazy face tattoos, which is at least something. I mean, we gotta give it to him, but besides that, yeah, sorry Stitches. Okay, enough screwing around. We've already talked about all of these rappers who were very popular at the time. Why don't we start looking at more niche artists to see if we can find some more influence? I mean, after all, we haven't even talked about the entire sad boy emo wave that was really popular around the time. I mean, that's really what Juice WRLD, XSXTentacion, and most importantly, Lil Peep came off of. I mean, you basically couldn't go anywhere in 2017 without seeing kids with dyed hair, face tattoos, dark hoodies, acting like they were going through the darkest period of human history. Not to mention the Zandemic that was going on at the time, which could probably be drawn back to Lil Wayne if we're being honest, but I really think that it was all these emo boys that really made it popular to take like 10 bars at once. And of course, after Pete passed away, he became very influential, basically popping that entire genre off and making many people around him very famous. And you could probably even make the claim that it was Peep's passing that put both XSXTentacion and Juice WRLD on that whole sad boy wave because they saw how popular it was at the time. However, as you already know if you watched my video on Lil Peep, he was a massive fan of this genre before he ever started creating his own music, with him looking up to tons of people like Dylan Ross, Thrax House, Team Sesh, and probably most importantly the Suicide Boys, who you just can't mention when it comes to the underground scene, as after all, they're probably two of the most popular independent artists in the entire world, with them putting on Grade A every single year and helping to put other underground artists in the spotlight. I would say that Lil Peep walked so they could run, because once they really started to pop off in 2020, absolutely everybody became interested in this genre. There was already a big spike back in 2017 after his passing, but the Suicide Boys definitely capitalized on that, and now everybody's listening to the sound. However, even legendary artists like the Suicide Boys were influenced by other artists like Black Smurf as well as Puya. In fact, Puya was actually the one who put them on in the first place, as painful as that might be to say. On top of that, he also really helped to put Ghostmane on as well, even though he technically got his start with Schema Posse and Jay Green, but he only really gained popularity once he started linking up with Puya. So is Puya actually the most influential artist in the entire SoundCloud scene? I mean, he ended up putting on two of the most popular artists in that entire wave, and he's also been making music as far back as 2011. But if we're gonna go all the way back then we also have to look at another big pioneer, being Bones, who a lot of people really like to call the father of the entire underground. And I would say that that's definitely a fair assessment. I mean, he was running with that emo wave almost before everybody else. I mean, Puya wasn't really making emo music back then, it was more so Memphis funk with a spin on it, which is also a very popular style of music, but I would say that emo rap is a lot more influential when it comes to the underground scene. On top of that, some people even attribute Bones to creating trap metal because he has a track from all the way back in 2012 where he was screaming at the end, although to be fair, I think anybody can scream on a trap, and I think the real father of trap metal is definitely Syringe. Now, Syringe really gets a bad rap when it comes to his influence. He's kind of like Famous Dex, where he started off very strong, but he eventually ended up getting too hard into drugs and started creating some pretty trash music. And because the music quality dropped so substantially, people really like to write him off and pretend like he wasn't as influential as he is. I mean, Syringe was dropping that type of music as far back as 2010 on SoundClick, so I would definitely say that he's one of the first to create trap metal consistently. On top of that, his Anti-World Collective definitely inspired a lot of other acts in the underground scene like Spider Gang and Midnight Society, who would both become influential in their own right. So I think when you're trying to discuss the father of SoundCloud rap, Syringe at least deserves a mention, even though I personally wouldn't give him that throne, although there is another throne that I probably would give to him, but maybe that's another video for another day. That throne might even be a toilet because Syringe is always shitting on the competition, but anyways, we've now looked at many different artists from the American SoundCloud scene. I think it's only fair that we take a look over the pond to see if we can find any artists that are more influential that popped off over there. I mean, after all, places like Russia and Ukraine are one of the most popular spots for emo rap and trap metal, so there definitely must be some artists over there that are capitalizing on that. Although unfortunately I don't speak Russian, so maybe if I have any Russian fans in the audience, you can show me a couple good acts over there that could be included in a follow-up video to this. I think that'd be kind of cool to give a spotlight to all the artists that make different languages of music who also might have been somewhat influential on the entire wave of SoundCloud rap, as over here in North America we definitely have tunnel vision when it comes to the artists that we pay attention to. If they don't come from America or Canada, we don't care about them. But anyways, if we're over here in Europe, then we gotta talk about Scarlord. I mean, after all, he pioneered rage music and trap metal. No, he didn't, I'm sorry to say. The dude hopped on a wave and definitely did a lot with it, but unfortunately you can't really say that he influenced a lot besides maybe being a masked artist, which you could probably also attribute to bands like Slipknot way before him. So sorry to say, but I wouldn't really say that Skylord is all that influential. No, the real reason that I wanted to look at the European scene is to take a look at Drain Gang with people like Echo 2K, Typhoid Digital, Blade, and most importantly, Young Lean. I mean, these guys changed absolutely everything in the online space, with them creating the whole sad boy wave back in 2013 before anybody else was really running with it. Not to mention basically creating all the aesthetics that we still see in modern day music videos even to this day. On top of that, Young Lean also influenced Travis Scott, one of the biggest artists in the entire world at this point, so that's definitely a pretty good cosign to have. The only unfortunate part about Young Lean's rise is that a lot of people wrote him off very early on, saying that he was a meme rapper who wasn't really making serious music, even though it was totally serious and people just didn't really fully comprehend it at the time, which is a pretty common theme when it comes to all of these early SoundCloud rappers, as after all, they were doing something so different that people just weren't used to it. They were rapping off beat, they were using these really odd samples that people didn't think fit with rap music, but despite that, they built up a very loyal fan base that still is around today, who call themselves drainers, and in fact, some of the most popular YouTubers on the platform are actually drainers, like PewDiePie and Pyrocynical, so Young Lean definitely has his hand in many different pies. However, despite that, he only really started to blow up in 2013, which is a little bit late for our purposes, so why don't we go back to America and look at another all-time legend, being Chief Keef. Now honestly, I don't really want to talk too much about Chief Keef because I still feel like I don't fully grasp the absolute magnitude of his influence on the underground scene. I haven't really researched into him too much, and I never really was a fan, so I don't want to be disrespectful and say something that's wrong. However, what I do know is that he's influenced countless generations of the underground scene, with artists as far back as Lucky, as well as modern day artists like Joey and Cemetery, all taking from the style that he pioneered all the way back in 2013. He even created a whole sound and music known as Glow, which is different to cloud rap in many different ways, but also has some similarities. And I truly believe that the influence of Chief Keef is going to be felt on the rap game for years and years to come, so I definitely want to give him his props right here, although I do have to say that he also blew up in 2013, so we still have to go a little bit farther back if we really want to find the father of SoundCloud rap. Okay, what about Black Cray? I mean, he ended up influencing Little Tracy, who would go on to influence Little Peep, and then Little Peep's death would go on to influence an entire wave of music. That definitely makes him seem like one of the most important artists ever when it comes to the underground scene, although he never really reached the heights of many of his contemporaries, which honestly isn't fair. However, once again, Black Cray was a little bit later on, and not only that, but he was actually a member of a group known as Raider Clan, which also included members like Bones, as well as Xavier Wolf, Eddie Baker, and Denzel Curry. All artists that went on to change a lot in the underground scene. I mean, Denzel Curry in particular went on to influence both X and Ski, who then became very influential in their own right. I think you kind of get the point that I'm making here, and I feel like I'm saying influential too many times in a row, but yeah, Denzel Curry is definitely very important to the SoundCloud scene. He has music all the way back in 2009, before most of these people ever started to create music. He helped to put on people like Puya and Fat Nick. I mean, this guy definitely seems like he could be the king of the underground. However, unfortunately, he wasn't the one who created Raider Clan, and I truly do mean that's unfortunate, because if Denzel Curry was the one who was leading the group, it would probably still be around nowadays, but instead, it was created by another artist that you definitely know, Space Ghost Perp. Yep, that's right. When it comes to the underground, absolutely every path goes back to Space Ghost Perp. He really is the first one, the first SoundCloud rapper, the one who created everything that we now know and love. His Raider Clan went on to put on some of the most popular artists that we still know and love nowadays: Xavier Wolf, Bones, Denzel Curry, Thousand Band Fonny, Black Cray. He also worked heavily with the ASAP Mob early on, giving them a lot of the style that they would later make popular. And of course, ASAP Rocky, being one of the biggest rappers in the game, caused a lot of influence, and that all came from Space Ghost Perp. I mean, even disregarding everything else he did, Blackland Radio alone is already influential enough to give him that title. I mean, he brought back Memphis Funk, he ended up popularizing it once again, he had the whole dark aesthetic before almost everybody else, he was running with this massive statewide collective before almost everybody else. Space Ghost Perp is one of the most legendary artists to ever touch the SoundCloud scene, but I don't think that he's the king. I'm sorry to say, but I feel like there's 3 artists that can actually take that throne away from him, and one of them is actually Ruben Slick. Yes, that's right, Ruben Slick mentioned in the big 2025 boys, but no, for real, Ruben Slick really did a lot of the stuff that Space Ghost Perp was doing before he ever did it. Him and his brother Lofty 305 ended up creating this collective known as Metro Zoo, which actually helped to influence Raider Clan early on. Not to mention, when you really look into it, I believe that Ruben actually created the whole colored dread trend that would eventually become very popular in the following years. I mean shit, this entire wave really reached its peak in 2018, and if you go back to 2017 you can see it gaining popularity. 2016 is when it started to get noticed. 2015 is when people were really popping out of the underground, and if you go any farther back than that, people will be looking at you crazy for creating this weird type of internet music, but Ruben Slick was doing it way before anybody else even got their start. But no, even that's not accurate, because if you really want to look at the king of SoundCloud rap, it's Lil B. We already know that it's Lil B. I mean, he really was the one who pioneered the entire offbeat type of rapping, even before Young Lean did it, before Bones did it, before even Space Ghost Perp started dropping music. Lil B was there. Not to mention how popular the whole bass persona became as the years went on, with it changing meanings many different times, and now even being spoken about in mainstream politics. That's how far Lil B's reach goes. Every time you call something based, it's because of Lil B. Not to mention, you can ask any underground rapper from around the time and they will all tell you that they were big fans of Lil B. Not to mention, he actually became an XXL freshman back in 2013, which is pretty crazy to think about, that the mainstream would accept him in that type of way, even with the weird type of music that he was making. Somehow Lil B was able to kick open the door, and everybody who ran through after him can thank him for being the most influential and king of SoundCloud. But I actually feel like there might be one other person who can take that throne. I mean, Lil B is very influential. He created the sound, the aesthetic, and so much more. But when we're looking at the first artist to really make a run on the internet and build a career off of there, it's not Lil B. It's Soulja Boy. I know that you think I'm joking right now, but no, seriously, Soulja Boy was really the first rapper to use the internet to build a career. Now, to be fair, he did get his start back in the ringtone era, but he was also basically the person who pioneered that entire era in the first place. And the ringtone era is what ended up pioneering the SoundCloud era. This is when rap music started to get dumbed down quite a bit, because people were basically only making songs that could be used as 5-second ringtones. And in a way, when you look at it, it's almost a precursor to what TikTok music would become. And Soulja Boy had so much foresight that he had a hit song all the way back in 2009. And yes, like I mentioned before, you have people like Lil B, Ruben Slick, and Space Ghost Perp all creating music around the same time, but that was in a very underground sense. When it comes to Soulja Boy, he was doing it and he was getting popular off of it. However, it's still kind of a toss-up between him and Lil B, because on one hand, you have Lil B, who created the entire aesthetic and sound that you still hear nowadays, but on the other hand, you got Soulja Boy, who showed the world that the internet could actually be used to get your music popping. So I could definitely see people going either way, but I think if you want to tell the entire story of SoundCloud rap from beginning to end, you have to start with Soulja Boy before then going to Lil B. That's just my opinion, and well, I'm gonna stand on it. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think that Lil B is the king of all of this? Do you think that it's Space Ghost Perp? Is it maybe somebody that I didn't even end up mentioning? I mean, there's definitely artists out there that I've never heard of before, so if you want to put me on some good sounds, definitely do so. And while you guys are down there, I want you to do something new. Instead of delete this gang, I want you guys to all say everything about this is wrong and you're invalid. I think that'd be pretty funny. It's a new gang, it's Invalid Gang. We all invalid out here. I appreciate you guys for watching. As always, subscribe to the channel if you're so inclined. I'm trying to get to 30K and we are slowly approaching that, and I can't believe it. Honestly, I never thought I'd get this far. But with all that said, I've done too much yapping. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.